On today's episode, we have Brandon Novak from the hit film series Jackass to share his story of skateboarding with Tony Hawk, addiction, working with Bam on Jackass, run-ins with the law, overcoming addiction, and what he's learned about his life. Sit back, relax, and get ready to lock in with Brandon Novak. Brandon, welcome to Locked In, man. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for Patrick introducing us and having you on the show today.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm stoked to be here. And it's been fairly easy to get here. We're in Danbury, Connecticut. I'm in Philadelphia, and it was a 39-minute flight. So
Oh, that's all it was?
Yeah, it wasn't bad at all.
Oh, I thought it was a little longer. That's good.
No. But Patrick called a bit ago, and he asked if I'd be a part of this, and Patrick's very near and dear to my heart. He stepped up when I did not know him at all. He was a stranger, but a dear friend of mine, Darren Prince, is very good friends with him. And I threw this charity event to raise funding to provide scholarships for men after they complete inpatient treatment center. And Patrick came out and he did this live mural of the lead singer, Jim, who plays for the band Pennywise, who came and performed. And we auctioned off this piece of art to someone that was at the event, and it provided a decent amount of money that went towards scholarships. So anything Patrick asked, and he didn't even know me at the time.
Yeah, he texted me. He's like, Brandon Novak? And I was like, that name sounds familiar. And then I looked it up, and I was like, oh, he was in Jackass and this and that. And me and my friends all grew up watching Jackass and everything in the news.
I apologize for that.
No, it's okay. And then with Bam and everything in the news and whatnot. So, I'm very grateful that you're here and you take the time. And I just got to know Darren, too. He's helping us out with the podcast and with Patrick and whatnot.
Yeah, those guys seem to have a lot of connections in a lot of places.
Yeah.
They're good friends to have, I'd say.
Definitely. That's what I'm learning.
And they're both, really stand-up guys. They're one of the people that, if I need something, I could rest assured knowing that they will do whatever they can to help me in a time of need. And those are the kind of people that I genuinely do my best to surround myself with.
Absolutely. I listened to your podcast with Johnny Mitchell that we were just talking about, and
he's my guy.
I listened to your podcast with Steve-O, and I don't want to bore you with, the same story repetitively over and over, so we'll try to navigate it a little bit differently than the other two.
Well, it's funny. I'm the most computer illiterate person you'll ever meet. I got my first ever laptop during the beginning of COVID, and I'm a 44-year-old man. It was not by my design. My team insisted that I get it to do interviews, and I've used it maybe 7 times, and I've given it away. I don't email. I'll text, but I prefer to talk because I'm a big instant gratification kind of guy. And if I have to write out a long thing, I'll pen and paper it and take a picture and then text that to you. So I say all that to say, you're probably like, why the fuck's he telling me this? I say that to say that I don't really listen to a lot of podcasts. And I'm really just not inclined in that way to do that. But I had done that guy Bert Kreischer's podcast. And what I didn't know was a reality that I've learned now, and the list of things you said you kind of checked out that I'd done podcast-wise, is that once you hit this certain stature within the podcast world, there's agents that will act as my agent to book me on particular podcasts. And I have an agent after the Bert Kreischer podcast who now books me on podcasts, which is why you're hearing all the Johnny. I didn't know him prior to doing that. And it's a really rad thing because I'm doing PR for a new adventure that I'm on business-wise. And, as times evolved, people don't do the news anymore. They do fucking podcasts. So I'm just podcast.
Yeah, and you don't know me either. This is our first
Yeah.
time ever meeting. So,
Totally.
But that's a cool thing about the internet and social media. And your story fits perfectly with what our podcast is about. People that have been to prison or have overcome addiction, and they come and they share the craziness that comes with that. And at the end of it, we always go through what they learned from it and how they can help others and the good that they're doing now. And your story just illuminates with that so well.
No, that aligns with the mission or cause that you're on. And it's funny, I didn't know you. I'm getting to know you now, but I make it a point to, like, Steve-O's podcast, that's my guy. I know Steve-O. He's my friend. We've known each other for a long time. But the majority of the people that I end up connecting with, I don't know, and I don't do any information or study up on, because I just did this really big guys in Maui. We went to Maui to do this podcast, and this guy's like a real Brandon Turner. He's like a real estate mogul and a big deal in that world. I knew nothing about the man. My agent booked me on the show, and we went out there, and right before we're going to it, so I said to my agent, I said, I'm like, so this guy's like a real estate guy? And he's like, what? He's like, I didn't say anything to you then. We're talking after I'd done the show. He's like, but I almost had a heart attack when you told me you didn't know who this guy was. Because some people will take that as a form of disrespect to not, like, get to know or understand the person. But quite the contrary, I don't. I walk into it blind or ignorant, if you will, because I want complete transparency. I want authenticity. I don't want to have a chance to kind of pre-rehearse an answer to a script that I've already looked at. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I really like to just organically let this thing go wherever I believe God sees fit to take it.
Absolutely. And then you can get like an understanding of whether you even like that person.
Totally.
Or you don't like it, and you're not just like being forced into something that you may or may not like.
For sure.
Does it ever get tiring telling like the same story on multiple platforms like that?
Well, the rad thing now is that it's kind of like I ended up on this real estate moguls podcast, who's this really big deal in Hawaii, and he's just a he's a philanthropist. He really wants to do good for humanity, and he's into religion and his spirituality, and there was still a way for our stories to intertwine and connect to make this really beautiful sweater, if you will. You know what I mean? Because there's like, in a sweater, there's a million pieces of yarn that are interwoven in order to create this beautiful work of art. And that's kind of how it's been working.
That's awesome. So from the start of your story, where are you from? Where were you born? What's like childhood like for you?
I was born and raised in Baltimore City, and I come from a a pretty interesting demographic of family members, if you will. My mother was essentially a single mother. I had a father who was around just enough to let me know he wasn't around. He was the kind of guy that taught me, like, one thing in life, and that was if and when I went to prison, how to conduct myself. And then I had this brother who became an attorney, who works in the White House practicing pensions and benefits.
Oh, really?
So I had my mother, who's like insanely smart. She's a nuclear physicist on the board of Mercy Hospital. My brother, who's this like hotshot attorney. And then my father, who rode with the Hells Angels and died of a drug addiction. And then you have me, who, at a very young age, I was blessed with the ability to come across the skateboard, and when the moment that took place, like, and that board touched my hand, I knew I was going to be a professional skateboarder, right? At that very young age, there was no reason for a plan B, a trait, or an option. I ate it, I breathed it, I slept it, I dreamt it, and at 14, I became the first skateboarder endorsed by Gatorade. They're flying me to Chicago, to the Quaker Oats building where they made Gatorade at the time, and I'm doing like this commercial with Michael Jordan. 15, I'm designing my prototype for Pal Peralta, which would ultimately, if I stayed on that course, become my pro model. I'm touring the world with Tony Hawk. I had like done some things at a very young age that some might equate to success and happiness, and maybe even dream of doing. And I live with that after school special, that cautionary tale, my father, right? Of like, because everyone loved Jerome. Jerome was a great guy. But when Jerome didn't come home to make dinner at 6, and we heard him and his biker buddies pull in the driveway at 3, and the key hit the lock, we shook like leaves because we knew what we were in for, and it was nothing good. So I could understand the psychic change that takes place upon an individual if they choose to ingest a drink or a drug, right? Like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde scenario, I recognized that really young. So I kind of made it a point to excel at everything that I was ever going to do in my life to prove to everyone that I would never become him, you know? But I believe my story is kind of like I was genetically predisposed. My father was an addict. His father was an addict. Ultimately, I followed suit later on down the road.
Do you think at a young age that you knew you would become an addict before you even tried a drug?
No, no, I did not. Not at a young age. But what I've learned throughout my life is everything is in retrospect. And today, life is like live forward and learn backwards. And what I see clear as day now is that at that young age, I was kind of being groomed to become him. You know, he would take me to the strip joints, and when he would go in the back to conduct business, I'd be sat at the bar stool, and the pretty dancing girls would pour shots of like ginger ale and Coca-Cola into these little shot glasses. I would do the shot. My father would like give me that look of approval. You know, I'd ride around with him while he did his drops. And, you know, so you're like a sponge at that age. You just kind of absorb what's happening unbeknownst to you at the time. That paired with the fact that I was genetically just fucked. It was inevitable that it was coming down the pipe. Yeah.
Who are you closer to, your mother or your father?
My mother.
Your mother?
I'm like a crazy mama's boy.
Really?
She's like everything to me.
Why do you think she stayed with him at that age?
I believe, you know, love's a fucking strange thing, and it makes you do strange things. And my father was an amazing guy. Everyone loved Rome except for his family. You know what I mean? Like, he was the life of the party. He walked in the bar. He bought the whole bar rounds and shots, and the drugs were flowing. And, you know, he was a womanizer. He had the gift of gab. And ultimately, all those things that my mother kind of fell for, I became later on. In a weird way. Like, I legit came him almost on steroids. So I can see how that would take place.
Do you think that the relationship your parents had together kind of correlates with where we see like a woman that likes someone that mistreats her now in today's day and age, or isn't exactly like the perfect match for them but has so much love for them?
Well, I can't speak upon that, but I can say that I've seen me repeat my father's actions later on down the road, and I never had a problem, you know, linking up with a really good woman. Mm-hmm. Because I had the wherewithal to understand that, like, I couldn't deal with me. Two of me, we go to hell in a handbasket. So I would get like a really put together woman with a great head on her shoulders that did not have a problem with addiction or alcoholism. And really what I believed that I loved them at the time, but looking back, it was just kind of a survival mechanism. Because I could get money, I couldn't keep money. I could get a house, I could never turn it into a home. So like they could kind of keep things afloat. And most importantly, what it always did for me is it allowed me to deflect me from me and allow me to avoid having to look at the person I always tried to avoid, which was me, by getting high. Because when I get high, I escape the reality that I had created for myself. You know, so it's just always deflection and, you know, justification, minimization, you know, just the last thing I ever want to do is be accountable for my actions.
Yeah. Now, a pro skater at that age, is that equivalent to like one of these Instagram social media influencers now in this day and age? Is there that much power to it and reach?
Well, no, there's nothing is like it is now with the power and reach. But at that age, so I had the ability, if I stayed on that path, to become a pro. But that at that time, they were allowing me to like design my prototype shapes. Basically, like, if you continue with this, here's a promissory note or something that you could obtain in the future, which is your own pro model. Which is funny, the way things evolve today in skateboarding, boards really don't even mean much. Like what board you ride, or if you're pro or not pro, that still means something for the heart. But the money in the skateboarding is through the endorsements, like the Red Bulls, the Monsters, the Adidas, the Nikes, the shoe, all those kind of endorsements and sponsorships. What board you ride and who you're sponsored by board-wise doesn't even matter.
No.
They don't even really pay.
How would your friends, if we had them here today, best describe you as a teenager?
During my skateboarding, like when I was in the thick of skating,
Yeah.
I literally just had a one-track mind, and it was skateboarding. I legit, I always talk about that skateboarding did for me at a young age what drugs and alcohol did for me at a later age, right? Like you give me that skateboard at the age of 7, you put me in a room with the world's prettiest models. I'll not only believe that they've been waiting for me, but that they're dying to marry me, right? Like drugs and alcohol later on down the road would produce that same delusional narrative that I bought into. So I just, nothing mattered to me, like in school didn't matter because I was thinking about being out of school, skating with the homies. And that's, I think, why my life was able to kind of take its own course. Because I think the majority of reality when growing up generally looks like you graduate, you get a job, you report to said job 5 days a week from 9 to 5. You have a boss that oversees all your performances or lack thereof. In the skateboarding raised me, right? Because my father was like hell on wheels, legit. And my mother got a job at Mercy Hospital at 15, drawing blood for $5 a pop, a phlebotomist, if you will, at that time, and then worked her way up the ladder to become that nuclear physicist, a very successful woman at the end of her career. But she was so hyper fixated on like being able to provide for the family and keep us away from my insane father that she consumed herself with work. And ultimately, my brother and sister, who were by a different father, were tasked with raising me a lot of the times. And they were like teenagers and they didn't want to fucking deal with me all the time. So then they allowed me to like skate, and I would skate all day, all night with like older skaters because I was pretty good. So they would take me under their wing. So there was nothing to be accountable to. I ran with older guys and traveled all the time. And my boss, who I checked in with, was a guy by the name of Todd Hastings, who was in Santa Barbara, California. And I would go to the 7-Eleven and pump in like $4 worth of quarters to call him and be like, yo, I just filmed this and let's use this for my part. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I kind of just like was going in a really positive direction. But then when that flipped, I was too far out for anyone to be like, whoa, what's going on with him?
Were your parents supportive of your skateboard career?
Yeah, totally. My mother, all about it. Brother and sister, they were, but they were, again, teenagers at that time doing their own deal. But they always would help out any way possible. And my father, who I speak very harsh of, is really now seeing that he was just a sick man that did the best that he could with what he had, because I've made amends with him a long time ago, although he's passed a long time ago. He even was supportive in his own way, you know?
Yeah.
I remember being in the basement after getting out for a skateboard, and he would not let me skate until I got a helmet. And I was like a kid. I was 7, and I didn't have a helmet, and for some reason I couldn't get a helmet. So he took one of those floaty pads that you use in the pool, and he like jammed it on my head and then allowed me to skate with one of those things.
I used to be one of those like wannabe skaters that had like the Tony Hawk helmet and the cool skateboard, but I couldn't skate for shit. So I'd walk around with the skateboard in middle school.
Yeah.
It's like 2009, 2010.
Street creds.
And
Fuck, 2009, I was like a full-blown heroin addict at that point.
Yeah, I was in middle school. I'm 28 now.
Yeah.
Crazy times, and playing Tony Hawk on the weekends too on the PlayStation.
Yeah.
It's cool to like see you were living that like real life.
Yeah. Yeah. It was I always say that skateboarding was the gift that was truly given to me by virtue of my higher power, right? You could be the best ping pong player in the world, but God might not see fit to put a paddle in your hand. Skateboarding is literally my God-given talent that I never even knew I was looking for. The way I got that skateboard was that I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and we used to spend vacation during the summer at Ocean City, Maryland. And there's a skate park on 3rd Street in Ocean City. And my sister would always live down the beach during the summer. And one day I would stay with her for weeks at a time. And I don't even remember it, but I know that we stopped by the skate park. And she's probably like 17, 18 at this point. And there was like a pro skater there who was talking to my sister and gave me his skateboard. I never was like, let's go to the skate park. I want to see a skater. I want to try a skateboard. I had no like desire or thought of it. And looking back, the guy was probably just trying to fuck my sister anyway. So he's like, here's this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that literally, that simple, kind act of generosity, like, was forever going to shape and mold my future. And it raised me, and it kind of transcended into what I do today and how I live my life. And skateboarding, you know, the two things that it instilled in me is that failure is not an option. Because if you notice skateboarders, they will try one trick for days, weeks, months, years, and then they get it and then they just move on. So like, failure is not an option, and no is unacceptable. And that came from skateboarding to me.
Now, you recognize it now that it was a God-given talent. Did you recognize it back then, and do you think you kind of took it for granted and misused that power?
I totally took it for granted and misused it, and I had no idea that that's what had actually happened. And funny enough, I'm 44. I just filmed this whole video part and put it out with my pro model, the one that like I never got to complete because I went from pursuing skateboarding to full-blown like heroin addiction. I thought that was like an excellent career choice. And so my dream of becoming that pro never took place. But it recently did, and I went and filmed this part, and I went to like Barcelona and all over LA, and probably it was the best part I'd ever put out. And while filming that part, I realized that it was my God-given gift. And you would have thought that I would have realized it at a way different time in my life. But how I realized it is today I'm like insanely busy and so consumed with a million projects, and time is just not something I have the luxury of having. And I'm filming this trick, and I can't make it. And I like hurt my ankle, and this day I'm like so frustrated. I throw my skateboard, I break it, and I'm just furious with the outcome. And at that moment, it dawns on me, and I'm at like the peak of my anger at this point, and it dawns on me that this is exactly why I love it. Because at this very moment, despite me not getting the outcome that I was desiring, it's doing what I've tried so hard to do for so many years and through so many different outlets, which was shut this fucking thing down. Because my brain never stops. It always tells me that I should be doing more. I should be doing less. I should be here. I should be there. I should make this. I should create this. I should fire them. I should hire them. And I've spent countless fucking dollars and traveled to countless countries and hung out with countless people and money, property, prestige, pussy, everything to try to like, you know, fill this internal void and to shut this off and have that brief moment of like peace and freedom. And I realized it far after my skateboarding career has ended, because I do it for the love of it now. But like, that was probably like a year ago. Like,
did any of those skills go away after like years of addiction? Or is it just natural when you get back on?
It's kind of like, it's not natural, but it's like muscle memory. You know what I mean? Like, my brain says that I'm 16 or 17. My body says that I'm like 99. Right? So I get on a skateboard, my brain's like, oh, fuck this, you can go for it, kill it. After 2 hours and like a small little slam that like an 18-year-old would like laugh at and not even realize happened, I needed a walker and go to a sauna for like 5 days straight. And I, you know, going into it, I just properly prepared myself accordingly. So I work out 5 days a week. I'm really into like health and wellness. I just try to do better with what I eat and cut out as much processed food as possible. I don't go crazy with it. But I also have a trainer. So when we were in the gym working out, I was like practicing on my balance and things like that. So that's where I had to kind of brush up on those skills.
Now, if you had to pinpoint one exact moment that caused you to go down a path of addiction and try drugs, what do you think that moment was?
There was no one exact moment. It was a series of events that kind of just ultimately took place for me to become so disconnected from reality that I thought that, like, I knew what was happening. I knew what I was doing, and I could control and or get myself out of any situation that I created for myself. So again, a chain of events landed me in this particular place. That once the drinking and the drugging took place full time, I was so disconnected from reality. I didn't know that I was gonna like drift to sea for the better part of 22 years.
I think a lot of people are curious about how someone that on the outside has so much, like skater and you know, becoming an actor and whatnot, and how someone could fall off that wagon.
For me, it was just like, right, I had the mother, I had the brother and the sister, and they were really consumed with just kind of making their way through life. At a young age, I was a pretty good skater, and people believed that there was like a method to my madness. And I wasn't the kid that had to be in when the streetlights were on. Skateboarding raised me. My friends that skateboarded raised me. And my dear friend Bucky Lasik, who, you know, rode for Pal Peralta at the time, took me under his wing, and we'd go out to California like all the time and stay at Hawk's house. And so it wasn't like, you know, people were on top of me day to day, mom, dad, brother, sister, to notice when my behaviors were off or my eyes were red or skating was taking a backseat to something else. People just thought that like I was pretty good successful with a really good head on my shoulders to make it to where I have at such a young age, that clearly I had to know what was going on, you know.
Do you wish you had that oversight on you?
No. Looking back, I do a lot of interviews, and a commonly asked question is, you know, would I take back or redo anything that I had done to get to where I'm at today? And I used to say the two things that I would take back are the pain and the sleepless nights that I'd caused my loved ones. But after I've thought a little bit more about that, I don't think I'd take that back either. I'm a sober guy now, and I've literally devoted my life to helping people who are where I once was. And the reason that I ended up to where I'm at today is because I was divinely inconvenienced over and over and over. But at the time when that inconvenience was taking place, I was so consumed by the mess that I could not see the message. I was incapable of seeing the blessing that was happening. And if anybody would have robbed me of my process, one less night of sleeping outside, one less day of prostituting my body, one less trash can being eaten out of, you know, all those deplorable things that I had done to keep my addiction afloat, if anyone would have robbed me of any of that, I don't believe that I'd be where I'm at today, or the child of God that I am, and with the understanding, you know, because with addiction and alcoholism, the wheelhouse, the demographic that I work with on a daily basis, meaning other addicts and alcoholics, are us kind of people are defiant by nature. We hate authority and we refuse to conform because we possess this job that consists of knowing everything. So then some nice soul comes by and suggests what we could do to save our life, and we suggest why you should fuck off because we know. For me, what my story looks like is I will never tell anybody what they should do. I don't have the answer to anything. All I have is my experience and my history that's landed me in this present moment. And if you can find more similarities than differences, it might make sense to maybe listen. But if not, I get that too. Yeah. Right. So I just kind of share my story from a position of understanding as opposed to being understood. And I try to deliver it in a way that other addicts and alcoholics who are also defiant, hate authority, refuse to conform, find it or make it land in a way that they see as so attractive, so desirable, and like so appealing that they like want to fuck it. right? Because if I can get them to want what I have so bad that they're willing to do anything it takes in order to achieve this outcome, then the terms of your contract will forever change. But it has to become our idea, right? So I just live my life through virtue of attraction rather than promotion. And if you see anything, appealing enough, then here's the information, reach out, and like, I'll do whatever it takes to get anyone the help that fuck what they need, but really what they deserve. And all of this and the knowledge that I possess and the information that I've acquired came from pain. It came from pain, man. And unmanageability to me is like a fucking Monday morning cup of tea. Like, the shit has to be unfucking bearable. Unbearable. My back has to be against the wall, and I have to have no other options, choices. And then you have my attention. And that's what this is. That's how this outcome was created, by virtue of pain. Because the right amount of pain created just enough willingness for me to reach out and say, you know what I do know? Is that I don't fucking know. Ultimately, I just dumb my way into this position. You know what I mean? It's really fucking freeing.
Well, that's the power of lived experience, and why like the peer recovery specialists in like Arkansas, I got to go to Arkansas and see like the programs that they're installing.
Yeah.
And those are so powerful because you're sticking a peer with someone and they have the lived experience, whereas like someone that went to college or whatever to focus on recovery and addiction could never give you what you could give someone.
Legit. It's all deliverance. It's smoking mirrors, really, right? We all, in me and my world, and I'd like to think humanity as a whole, we all want the same outcome, which is just this euphoric world filled with peace where everyone's happy. And I'd like to believe that we're all doing the best that we can to achieve those results. But if anyone looks at me as an individual who has the answer, they're fucking twisted. Like my resume states 13 inpatient treatment centers, lowest count of outpatients and detoxes. My mother bought me a plot. People had taken life insurance policies out on me. Life support for 7 days. Medevac 4 hospitals, 4 states, 4 overdoses. Mother sold 3 homes to pay for 2 treatment centers. At the end of my addiction, I'm a 38-year-old homeless heroin addict who stands on the corner and lets men blow me for more heroin, right? Like, my mother's praying to God for my death because she can't take it anymore. That's what my resume states at 38. I'm now 44. Do the math, right? Like, why in this short period of time that I've been blessed with sobriety would anyone think that I have the answer? All I realized is that for the better part of 22 years, looking back, right, retrospect, live forward, learn backwards, my life, I look back and said, all I did was like rearrange the furniture on the Titanic. So I just did process of elimination, but backwards. The last thing I tried was the first thing that worked.
Yeah, that was a great analogy.
It's fucking true, man. But I couldn't see it. I could never see that because I was too smart for my own fucking good.
Yeah.
Right? So actually, these things that I acquired throughout my journey of life, depending on one's perspective, could say were hurting me more than helping me. But then you get to a point to where I'm at now, and it's like my poison has become my medicine. So it's all perspective.
Did you go to college?
No. But today I'm paid to speak in universities. I got my GED in the penitentiary.
Isn't that wild?
So it's like, it's magical. And this is just my take on it. It's only done by way of my relationship with my creator.
Yeah. What age did you start getting into the whole Jackass filming?
Fuck.
Was that before you would have went to college or after, around like the same time period? If you were to go to college.
What college is 18?
Yeah, 18 to 22.
No, after.
It was after.
So I'd probably 24. So 3, 4, 5-ish.
How do you go from skateboarder to that?
Well, skateboard. So one of my best friends, that guy Bam, him and I were like best friends as a child, and every year we'd practice for this contest, the Bricktown NSAs in New Jersey, and either he would win or I'd win every year without fail. Best friends, but like arch enemies in this contest world. And one year he showed up to the contest, I didn't. He asked my mentor, Bucky Lasik, where I was, and Bucky's like, I think he's on heroin. And Bam so young was like, what the fuck is that? He didn't even know what that was. Fast forward to years later, he chose to pursue his career in bettering his life, skateboarding, created the first CKY video, became a millionaire, household name. I chose to pursue heroin and became this homeless heroin addict living on the streets of Baltimore. He stopped into a skate shop in Baltimore to do a demo one day. I stopped in a few days later to try to borrow some money from the skate shop to get some more heroin. They're like, we're not going to give you any money, but your boy Bam was in here, and he said, if you ever want to get clean, here's his number. I called the number a few days later. In the blink of an eye, I'm like on a Greyhound bus from Baltimore going to Pennsylvania to live with him. And at the time, he had the TV show Viva La Bam. And he said, look, if you want to get off heroin, you can live with me. You could be on the show. You could get paid from, Paramount. And I had done all that. And then that kind of gave birth and segued into Jackass. And all the people within both of those, not all of them, but a lot of the guys, the common bond was skateboarding or that world of skating. Like you had all the skate shit, but you weren't like a fucking skater guy, right? But you still kind of were hanging around the crew.
Yeah.
Same within the world of ours.
Do you think that came from Jackass and those early on TV shows? Like that, I because I'm years younger, so we would have gotten it from somewhere.
Do I think what came from what?
Like that era of wanting to be the cool skateboarder person walking around and, that look of being a skateboarder.
I think it just came from everything kind of comes and goes in cycles.
Yeah.
Everything. Like everything. Even I live above this very bougie, fancy furniture place, and they have one in like Moscow, in Paris, in Italy, in New York, and in Philly. And the furniture's right now is just what I see in the window is like not my deal. But it's like this it almost looks like Grateful Dead kind of era. It's this tie-dye, like patched work stuff that's like crazy amounts of money that right now is apparently coming back. It's just like everything goes in cycles. Skaters today are wearing like bigger clothes with like the Jenko logos on their back pockets, which you could probably remember.
I don't know if I saw it. I'm a visual person.
Yeah, totally. But like, it went through like the punk stage of the tight clothes and Sid Vicious and Anarchy to now like bigger, baggier jeans. I mean, when I was 14, I was skating in like size 38 jeans and 3X white t-shirts. And that's kind of like the roundabout way that it's going. So I don't know if it's the very long answer to your short question is like, I don't know if it's Jackass infused, Viva La Bam infused. I do know that when Bam had Viva La Bam on MTV, he was outselling Tony Hawk's skateboards because he was like a household name through MTV, which I'm sure made skateboarding look appealing to people who otherwise wouldn't have found skateboarding. Would
you have considered yourself a household name at that time because of the show?
Fuck, I'd like to think so. All right? No, not at all. No. I was gaining some recognition, and I was able to make a living. But ultimately, my role on that show was a junkie's dream, right? Because I was the guy that would do any stunt. Because if you like look at where I came from and what I was doing prior to the opportunity I was being given, it was like no questions asked. Would I prefer to like let a man blow me for $40 to get heroin, or do I want to jump down these stairs naked? I think I'll jump down. You know what I mean? Like, because if I do that, and the stunt's good enough, meaning bad enough, I get broke off, I'll probably go to the hospital, which means I'll get some free pain pills. I'll get paid. I'll get screen time, become the household name, right? So the junkie's dream of that character that I played, as long as the behaviors were outlandish enough, the antics became outrageous enough, the higher the ratings went, the more in demand I became, the more money I could ask for. which ultimately just went back to more drugs in my body.
So
even in that world, it evolved and cycled.
who came up with the idea for the stunts? Was that like you get to pick which ones you want to do, or does someone say, hey, we want you to do this, and you're like, fuck it, let's go?
It was a combination. If you came up with your own stunt and they bought into it, then you'd get paid more on top of it.
Really?
Yeah.
And what was like your favorite one, if you had one, or favorite memory from that?
People, anyone that got screen time, like anyone, because like it all kind of just connected into a win for me.
Yeah. Do you think that correlated into some of the other TV shows we see? Like maybe even like, what's his name? Rob Dyrdek's
Yeah, for sure. It definitely gave way and birth to like YouTubers.
Yeah.
Right? Like you see those houses where they go live in and then they like film them like fucking with everybody.
Yeah.
Like that's literally what Viva La Bam was. And before that was CKY.
Yeah.
So now a lot of like the big YouTube guys, Danny Duncan, you know that name?
Yeah.
He's a good friend of mine. He wrote the opening for my last book, or like one of the forwards. He's the first to say it. He's like, you know, Bam kind of created this. He was like the godfather of that. And then, you know, they took that and doing what they're doing now.
Now, you had just brought up the, you know, getting a blowjob for drugs, which you're very open about on a lot of these podcasts. What was that like? Like, how did that all come about?
It didn't matter. It was never like anything. Like, you know, on Howard Stern's show, I like lick Richard Christie's hemorrhoid ass for $1,000, I think.
On the
like,
show?
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I was never a guy who was censored or felt like, whoa, maybe this is. It's funny. Then any press was good press. But the man that I am today and the work that I do, I really had to kind of reevaluate my mindset on such things like that because that's not the case.
How do you feel about what you've done in the past now?
Well, it can be perceived in two different ways. It could be me, you know, glorifying those war stories, depending upon who's listening to it and what mental state they're in at the time of listening to what I'm saying. But for me, it's shared by way of that's who I am. That's who I was, not who I am. And if I can change, there's no reason why you can't. You know, and that's why a lot of people buy into what I say when they're in a dark place, because they know that my story holds weight. It's tangible. There's evidence. You can read about it. You can see it on clips. It exists. So at the end of the day, a lot of people are like, if that motherfucker can do it, there's no reason why I can't. So now, my defects, the things that were holding me down, the things that were literally killing me on a layaway plan, have today become my assets. And even what I didn't know that was happening then, creating this really big social media platform, right? I'm not a psychic. I could never predict the future. I had no idea to see that social media was going to like run the world basically one day while doing Viva La Bam and Jackass and CKY and Radio Bam and all these other things we had done. I started building this social media presence that I had no idea was ever. I didn't even know I was going to get sober, right? I had no idea how my story was going to play out. I probably thought that I would die in the process of, because I lived every day to consume as much heroin that I could physically shoot into my arm. But then I was blessed with sobriety and then this new way of life, and then literally tripped into this position of helping people for a living and literally giving my life to this, but being able to use that platform that was built through a lot of like questionable times where people were like, maybe you shouldn't do all this, say all this, be so upfront about that, to now, you know, poison becoming medicine, to now saying like, this is who I was, not who I am. Who I am is clearly different than who I was. And if you're in a way that you need help getting out of the position that you have created for yourself, here's the information, here's the numbers. Reach out to me and my team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's all.
I think when you're that real and honest and vulnerable, and you lay everything out on the table, it separates you from the masses who aren't 100% in on laying out all their dirty laundry, and now no one can really take that away from you. Like, no one can call in and say, oh, he did this, 20 years ago. And it's like, dude, I shared that story.
And there's freedom.
Yeah.
There's freedom that comes with it. And no one owns that
Absolutely.
on me.
Why didn't you stick with the Jackass series and have like a successful acting or maybe celebrity TV appearance show? What happened with that?
I don't believe that that's what I was meant to do. Maybe tomorrow it will be. But like as of right now, I followed my calling and landed in this world of helping and truly what I believe my mission on this earth, again, today is, because tomorrow anything could change, is to just make humanity and society a little bit better of a place today than it was yesterday.
Yeah. By
design and virtue of my lived experience. Humanity's one of the only living being that's arrogant enough to think that we understand what God's will is. It's so big, it's so broad, it's so, my feeble mind could never conceive what it is. I'd like to think that I might have an idea of what it isn't.
Do you ever think about those who were in your position that didn't make it, that didn't survive, and why you did?
Yeah, I do. And again, perception is everything, right? I travel all over the world and I give talks, and always when I'm done, a mother or father will approach me and they say, how do we lift the stigma? How do we lift the stigma? The stigma, how do we lift the stigma? And my response to theirs is, fortunately or unfortunately, depending upon one's perception, the stigma is lifting because the death toll is rising, right? So, and I'm not trying to sound heartless or callous when I say this, but because of your son or your daughter's death is the exact reason why we're here tonight shining light on this really dark, drab, what most look like is an unwinning fucking battle. So your child did not die in vain. As a matter of fact, your child died to give me my life. So my mother, who has never met you or your child, would like you to know how grateful she is that she did not have to bury me in that plot that she bought me. So I try to let them know, you know what I mean? So it's like, how do I want to look at it? For years I was the victim. Why me? Why me? Why me? Why me? The reality is, why the fuck not me? So once I owned my part in the process that I played to create this outcome, good or bad, then my life started to change.
How did addiction translate into like crime, like getting arrested? Because for some addicts, it doesn't necessarily translate into going to jail and doing a prison sentence and whatnot.
Yeah. My alcoholism, my addiction took on a life of its own, right? Again, speaking about my story only, I was the kind of alcoholic and addict that once I began using it, I lost the privilege to have a say-so in my life anymore about anything that I did. My life then became solely about getting and using and finding ways and means to get more. So who I went with, what I did, and when I did it all revolved around the fact of that drugs were going to be obtained along the way. And if you caught me on a day where I was sick enough from lack of heroin, meaning withdrawing, whatever I had to do to acquire another bag was going to happen. And it was never personal. It was just business. Because I was always a good guy. My rap sheet states that I'm just a fucking nuisance to the law, right? I'm not a violent offender. I'm a felon I'm a convicted felon passing fucking fake scripts. Like, just really annoying things to the courts. I was like a gnat that wouldn't go away. But I was never violent. I was never, an offender that hurt others. I was a sick man that was caught up in making bad decisions to continue my journey with addiction. And whatever it took to get that next one was going to happen. I always say the only thing that never took place in my story was homicide. And it's not that it was because I'm not cut from that cloth, or I'm not. I cringe at the thought of confrontation. I people please, and that's all a direct result of my upbringing with my father, dealing with a lot of traumatic shit as a child. So I literally start shaking when confrontation's going to happen. But if you would have caught me on a day where I was withdrawing enough and the opportunity presented itself and it promised me heroin, I would have done it. And that's just because, well, there's a lot of reasons why. But it was never personal. It was always business.
What was it like to be noticed in jail? 'Cause people knew you at that time, I'm assuming, right? They would have counted you as a celebrity in jail, right?
It was good and it was bad. The sentence that I got where I did the most time, it was because I was doing these weekends. And on these weekends, I'd fucking shove all these drugs up my ass and I'd sneak them into the joint. And I would do that Friday through Sunday, but then I would go do this radio show Monday night on Sirius Satellite Radio, which is uncensored radio. And I'd talk about, I just did my weekend. I'm now Monday night doing the show and talk about how I boofed all these drugs up my ass and how the white shirts, the sergeants were fucking lazier than my dead grandmother. I could do a better job. And they heard that. And then they revoked my shit and gave me my full back time. And then while in there, they'd put me in the SHU, the special housing unit. And then they would put me in the hole, 23-1. And then they would move me from block to block to block, and they would shake every block down so that other inmates would get furious when I'd show up on the block because they know that I'm going to bring heat with me. So it was, but then it was good because they're like, oh, you're that guy from fucking Jackass. I have two guys fucking on my arm, a tattoo, missionary style, in a flower patch with rollerblades holding up a gay flag. I have an idiot tattooed on my ass with hearts on it. And like all these, like, what most would think gay acts of things tattooed on me, these guys in the joint are like, we'd expect nothing less from you. You know what I mean?
So they don't give you a hard time or anything?
No, they actually they condone it. They accept it, should I say.
Yeah.
It gives me that pass.
So do you think a weekend jail pass would even help someone, especially in your situation?
Well, at the time I thought no. You might say no. Me looking back on it, absolutely. Absolutely. Because remember I told you a series of events took place by way of me being divinely inconvenienced over and over, repercussions from my actions that created just the right amount of pain for me to become willing to kind of maybe think that I don't know what's going on and reach out and ask for some help for some people to do. Those were the series of events that were happening. The sleepless nights, the weekends in jail, the fucking shoving drugs up my ass, the hemorrhoid surgery I had to have as a result of shoving drugs up my ass. Like all of those things were paving way to a better, brighter life.
I haven't heard the term boofing in a few years since I was in
jail.
Yeah,
thank God. That shows that you too are evolving.
Yeah. So why do people do it that way instead of swallowing it? Isn't it a little bit more risky to just shove it up there when you're doing the squat and cough?
For me, no. And I knew, right? Like if I put it in my mouth and swallowed it, I got to hope that it lands in my ass without like whatever I've concealed it in melting through all the bodily fluids.
Yeah.
If it was there, I knew it was there. I've had experience with it doing it that way, so I knew the odds of me getting it back were pretty good.
I listened to Steve-O's episode, and he said you've had so many medical issues with your ass, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Because of this?
Dude, yeah. The doctors that were doing my surgery, they believed that I was with my fiance at the time, who was now my ex, and they said they pulled her out of the room, and they're like, he says that this incident happened through this one thing being shoved up his ass, and you're his fiance? And she's like, yes, I'm his fiance. One thing shoved up his ass. They're like, ma'am, this is years and years worth of damage. Meaning that they think I'm gay and they don't understand why she's my fiance. But then years later, I get sober. I had to have hemorrhoid surgery because my ass would just like start bleeding profusely. These massive hemorrhoids. Just my body started to kind of heal, but certain parts of it refused to heal because so much damage. And when I went to the hospital to have the surgery, they like put me on this. I basically looked like a U upside down, and my ass was up. And they're like, "Oh shit, you're that guy Novak from," and I'm like, "Yeah." And then all of a sudden it kicks in, and I'm like knocked out. And I don't know what the fuck they did. I hope they didn't do anything unorthodox.
But you know, it makes great content. And the whole prison suitcase thing.
Yeah,
because people are fascinated with it. You know,
it's true. So people look at my life today and they're like, "Fuck you. Your life's probably pretty boring today." And I'm like, no, it's actually so fulfilling and so entertaining to me. And they're like, how can that be? I'm in bed by like 8 o'clock. I enjoy like changing my cat's litter box, going to the grocery store, really fucking monotone elementary shit that most people are just so bored with. And the reason why is because I was so disconnected from reality for so long that like, I really take pride and pleasure in like looking at the trees.
Do you appreciate like your alone time?
Yeah, too much so. Yeah. Which is why I'm a fucking 44-year-old single man that lives with 3 cats.
No kids?
No.
Do you ever want kids still?
I have no desire at the moment. I mean, that could change tomorrow too.
Absolutely.
You know, I really believed I've been placed in this position where I've truly given my life to helping people who don't see a light at the end of that dark tunnel. And that's consuming. That takes a lot of time. So, but I don't know, that could also be me like just deflecting or justifying not wanting to look at the real root of the cause here is that I don't do well in relationships. I don't, I'm selfish. I like to just get on a plane and go to skate in Spain if I want, or California. You know what I mean?
But maybe, you're just trying to regain everything that you lost, all that time that you had over those years of addiction, that you want to find peace within yourself with that.
The beautiful thing about my sobriety is that the longer I stay sober, the more I know that I have no fucking idea. And
do any of us?
Right, well, a lot of people believe they do, I think, which leads, when I thought that I had a really good idea of what was going on, I led a very tiring life. You know, but little did I know, the moment that I admitted complete defeat was the exact second I secured the ultimate victory. I was trying to skate. I wasn't trying. I was skating Saturday, and I was trying this trick, and I was like filming it, and I was pushing really fast to get to it. And when I was going really fast to do this trick, I wasn't coming close. And all of a sudden, I decided to slow my speed down, skating up to it. And when I slowed it down, everything was in control. And I actually could like envision me landing and riding away. It was more manageable and contained. As opposed, and that was life, right? I'm always like so fast to approach, got it, da-da-da-da-da. If I just kind of slow down, take a breath, regroup, reevaluate, reassess, I usually get a better outcome.
What do you think was your rock bottom moment that inspired change within you, looking back on it now?
Yeah. Ironically, my last bottom wasn't my lowest bottoms by any means. I'd had much lower bottoms in the past, but this one was my lowest by way of it came up to meet me, right? Because looking back at all those attempts at trying to better my life through incarcerations, through psych units, through 12-step meetings, inpatient treatment centers, outpatient, that I thought were failures. Quite the contrary. They were actually like wins, despite whether I successfully completed or if I got loaded in there or they kicked me out, because these seeds were being planted. And I'm a firm believer, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear mantra. And when the student became ready, the teacher appeared. And my design looked like I went to a state-funded facility that cost $2 to get into, where most people would say, no one can get clean in an establishment like that. It's unheard of. They sell drugs right out front. Like, true story. But I believe that you can get sober in a bar if you're ready. And when all those seeds were planted, when a series of events took place and the pain became great enough, it's like they just fucking eroded out of the dirt like they were on angel dust, and they just blossomed, and everything made sense to me. And I was on my way to treatment. I was in this van. They came and picked me up, and they were driving me. And before I even got into treatment, I could kind of see like how things were going to play out, right? I realized that on my way to treatment, still withdrawing from heroin, sick as a research monkey, man. Like, I could piece together that the common denominator in my problems were me. And if I just got the fuck out of my way, I might stand a chance at a better day. And I'm telling you, it's like the skies parted and I just walked across the sea. And I hadn't even entered into that facility yet. I was still in this druggy buggy being driven there in the back seat, curled up in a fetal position because I was so sick. I just couldn't stand the thought of anything. Living, breathing, dying, it all sucked. And when I got to that facility, I knew that things were different. I knew that they were going to be different. But I also had the wherewithal to know that I had said that many times before. I had cried wolf. And I didn't think I was crying wolf. I just didn't understand the severity of the situation that I was in, meaning my addiction. And looking back, I never could understand why I got beat the fuck every time I stepped in the ring with my opponent. Because I was a really smart guy. Pride myself on being like an intelligent, outside-the-box individual thinker. And looking back, no wonder I got beat the fuck. Because I never gave it the time or attention that it deserved. Because I know. I wanted what you had, but I wasn't willing to do what you did to get what you got. And finally, like, looking back, acquiring all the information, seeds being planted, I had now become accountable, right? Ignorance was no longer bliss. I had been given this information that no matter how much I'd like to try, I can't fucking forget. And they would say things to me like, it's really hard to drink a glass of wine when it's cut with AA, or shoot a bag of heroin when it's cut with NA. It doesn't quite sit so right anymore. And now, right, like, I'm really well versed, totally understanding, appreciate, recognize, and definitely give attention and time to the disease that I suffer from. And I remain proactive in my recovery. I know that today I suffer with a disease called alcoholism, not alcoholism. And I can't stay sober on yesterday's sobriety. And I took heed to all the things that my mentors were suggesting that I do early on. And almost 9 years later, I still do the same shit today I did when I was in that fucking $2 inpatient treatment center. I'm an accessories whore, right? I get consumed by money, property, prestige, fucking things that are glitzy and glamorous looking, that always, 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 without fail, divert me from my primary purpose. I've done it so many times that I can't even say that it wouldn't happen, right? The handwriting's on the wall and it's in my writing, and I know that.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a better understanding now of how hard it is to help someone who doesn't want to be helped? How it's nearly almost impossible?
Again, perspective and perception. When I thought that it wasn't helping me, it was helping me, right? Like, now if you look at, okay, here we go. If you look at the analytics, if you look at the statistics that are the numbers, the data that the government's collecting and consuming by whatever polls and data that they put out there, it states that we're fighting an unwinning battle. Right now, statistics state theoretical evidence dictates that I am to be high or dead right now. Cold, hard facts. The fact that I'm not is miraculous, equaling a miracle, and B, it defies fucking logic. Cold, hard data states that I am to be high or dead right now. So if we look at it from that perspective, it looks like there's no light at the end of this tunnel. We are fighting an unwinning battle. But ask my mother, who has not had to bury me in that plot that she bought me 14 years ago. if I'm fighting an unwinning battle. You see what I'm saying?
So how do we create more success stories like you then, from someone that's come from it? What's the answer?
I work with the DEA, right? The DEA had come to me and they said, look, we understand that we cannot arrest our way out of this problem. We are making no leadway in this war on drugs. Just say no is a fucking proven failure, blah, blah, blah. They've brought me in to be the keynote speaker at these opioid summits that they throw in. The DEA is, the DEA. But within the umbrella of the DEA are all these different factions in different states, and they're all kind of ran a little differently. And they throw this opioid summit, this 360-degree opioid summit. And they bring me in to give my talk, right, to like different demographics of people. Middle school kids up to DEA agents, to kind of give them a different perspective on what we're doing here and the best approach to yield a better outcome. They said that they were interviewing Pablo Escobar not too long ago. And they said to Pablo, Pablo, how do we stop the supply? How do we stop the supply? How do we stop your people from sending in fucking billions and billions worth of whatever? And he looked at him plain as day and said, you stop the supply by stopping the demand. I lived every day and every night of every breathing moment in my life coming up with money to consume as much heroin as possible. I've been sober over 8 years now, which means I no longer live like that. I'm just one person, right? Within that time of my sobriety, I've helped another human being. That's 2. 2 have helped 4. 4 have helped 8. 8 have helped 16. Within that 16 that I just talked about, I guarantee you we've slowed down the demand, right? So if we can continue to navigate on that journey, helping one individual at a time, meeting them where they're at, not where I believe they should be or expect them to go, we can change the outcome. But I think that that's, so simple that sometimes we can miss it, including myself.
What have been some triggers for you along your way the last 8 years? And how do you fight through them?
Well, believe it or not, my sobriety has been very monotone, and I have not been triggered. And most will be like, that's insane. That doesn't even fucking sound right. But it's the truth. And the only reason why is because I was beaten into a state of reasonableness, where I was in so much pain that when I got sober, I didn't know if I was done or if I was never going to use again. What I knew for certain is that the pain was so great that I just didn't want to feel that way anymore. So I started buying into the suggestions. And they would tell me things like, in order for you to keep what you have to give it away. Feelings aren't facts. Feelings will pass. And I started buying into what they were saying, and I started to feel better. And then the next day I felt a little bit better and a little bit more better. And then all of a sudden my life just got really good really quick, but I still did what they suggested. Like, if you stick to the basics, you don't have to go back to the basics. And I still live today how I lived then. And because I remain proactive in my recovery, I'm armed with so much information that I can't be ignorant to it anymore. So if I find myself in a place or a position that's really uncomfortable or hurting, I have no one to blame but myself for not doing what was suggested to get me out of that place, right? Because I've been accountable to my actions. When I got sober in the beginning, they said, if you're not happy with where you're at, take a look at who fucking put you there. And that's the truth, even to today. So, I know that I have these tools, that I'm armed with the facts, that I can create a better outcome, provided I'm willing to do the work that's entailed, which generally is not fun or appealing. So
working on ourselves is one of the hardest things you can do.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, that's why I got high for so long, was to deflect me from me. You know, I'd escape this reality that I create for myself. And then all of a sudden I'd come down, the heroin would wear off, and I'd see life for what it was again. And I'm like, fuck, scramble to like hurry up and get more, which created just this wash, rinse, repeat of cycles of living.
Did having a good support system help you too?
It's everything. It was everything. The opposite of addiction is connection. And when I was ready to take this thing seriously, I surrounded myself with like really good people that genuinely had my best interest at heart. And it wasn't by like, oh, I want what they have because they drive a nice car or they have a big home or a really pretty wife. It was like, I want what they have because he's not receiving a phone call from his wife saying, if you're not home within the next hour, your shit's going to be on the front yard. He's not receiving a phone call from his probation officer saying that he just violated and he has to go back. You know, all those things were like very appealing to me. He has a consistent roof over his head consecutively, that he always can go home and open the door and get into the same bed and open the same refrigerator. That's all I ever wanted, was security and stability. That's all I ever wanted. And those things were very appealing to me. So that's how I was able to kind of link up with mentors and advisors.
Has the felony on your record presented any challenges in the life that you've built for yourself now?
No, it's actually helped. It's actually become an asset. In my world, it's one of the only worlds where the worse your record reads, the more credible you are.
It gives you credibility.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I think that's so important you said that, because we want to change that stigma that, you know, a felony doesn't define the rest of your life in a negative way.
For sure. It's like I always say, your history does not have to dictate your future, but it can absolutely guide and direct it. And I mean that wholeheartedly.
What's your life look like now? I know you've touched on it briefly, but give us everything, our audience, everything that you're doing now and what's to look forward to.
At the moment, I've just opened my, God's humor. Well, my story looked like this. I went to a 90-day inpatient treatment center, and from there I went and I lived in a sober living house where I resided for 1 year. And I did that because my sponsor suggested that I do that because he had done that. So it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that might be the best decision. And I did that, and that house did for me what no other home was able to do. I could always do good in a confined setting. I could always do good in an institution. I can fall in line. I'm very institutionalized. I know how to kind of do that day in and day out. But for me, the ball was always dropped once I completed my stay at whatever kind of institution, whether it's a treatment center or incarceration, and I'm thrusted back into reality. That's like, whoa. So when I completed my treatment center, I went to a sober living house, which was like a step-down process, and it still held me accountable, and I stayed with like a bunch of like-minded people, and we leaned on each other, and we made it through. And I promised that when I found myself in a position that I was financially capable, I was going to recreate that sober living house that I lived in. And 5 years later to the day, I opened up my very first Novak's house in Wilmington, Delaware. It was one house with 10 beds. And today I have 6 houses with 65 beds. But what I do is I travel the nation and I give talks and raise money in order to provide scholarships for any man, because they're all men's housing, that's in search of continuing their journey after completing a program in a safe, structured, accountable setting for their recovery. I refuse to let price be a deterrent as to why someone can't continue on their journey of recovery. So I just provide beds if I have them available for anybody in need that's willing to do what we suggest while residing in Novak's house. And then in doing that, unfortunately, the demand was overwhelming. The beds stayed full. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish there was no demand and the houses didn't exist. but there's demand, so I fill that. And I just knew that I could do more and be better and help more. So through recovery, I learned that I can create the environment that I seek. I don't have to see it to believe it. I just need to believe it, and I can see it. So I was like, fuck this. I'm gonna do bigger and better and help more. And here's God's strange humor. On 420, April 20th, which is National 420 Weed Smoking Day in the world, Delaware literally approved me of my license to open up my own treatment center. So I've opened up my own treatment center, and it's called Redemption Addiction Treatment Center, and it's in Wilmington, Delaware, and it allows me to help more. And I'm just kind of continuing on that journey.
And you have a book too.
Yeah. I've written several books, but I just did the audio versions that came out, and I narrated them in the streets of Baltimore and Dream Cellar, and that was a really, really, really interesting journey to go down narrating books.
You have the voice for, you got a good voice. You got the voice for it.
Yeah. It's fucking, I totally underestimated that process, but I did it. I completed it, and I'm really proud of it. It's funny, drugs and alcohol consumed every living fiber of my being for the majority of my life. And then I got sober, and now they consume just as much of every living fiber of my being. The only difference is I don't partake in them, and it allows me to help a lot of people that do partake in them.
Yeah.
It's just it's magical. That only makes sense within my recovery world.
Do you think the world of you and the world of Bam reversed because he was there to help you years ago, and now we see what's going on in the news with him and his struggles?
I think that everyone gets a turn. Everyone gets a turn, and the world has a way of right-sizing people. So, for me, what I've learned is that no one's exempt. No one is exempt, despite age, race, creed, religion, lack of religion. Addiction and alcoholism does not discriminate. 1 out of 3 people will be affected, whether it's directly or indirectly. And it's no longer the guy under the bridge with the needle hanging out of his arm with the cup shaking it for change. It can also be like the celebrity household name. It can be the billionaire's son in Aspen.
Yeah. What do you think your message is to the individuals that are listening to the show who are very interested in your story and what you've overcome and what you've been through? What do you want them to take away from this?
That we're human beings, not human doings. And we're all just doing the best with what we have. And for me, I much prefer to come from a positioning of understanding as opposed to being understood. So at the very least, after all this shit that I've said in this very short period of time that you've unfortunately had to hear my voice, if you can find more similarities than differences, maybe it would make sense to look into what I do. And if there's a way that I can help you throughout your journey, right on. You can reach me directly, 610-314-6747. If there is no similarities and it's more differences, then fucking amazing. I salute you, and I will cheer you to the bitter end of whatever direction you go in.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come here today. It's been a great conversation. Hopefully a little bit something different.
It was. I enjoyed this. It was definitely different. It was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome, man. And we'll put all your, book links, social media links in the bio. And
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, we got you, man.
Yeah, give Redemption Addiction Treatment Center a follow. That's my new treatment center. My Instagram. My website takes you down to all that, brandonnovak.com.
Awesome. Cool, man.
Thanks so much, brother.